Good evening. I'm Hugh Barrett, Board President of the Springfield Public Forum. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's program on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Forum. As you can see, I'm standing here in Springfield Symphony Hall. While we can't be here together in person tonight, we are hopeful to have a full fall calendar here. If you don't, please follow the Forum on social media and sign up for our mailing list to be notified of our fall calendar. Tonight's program, we're delighted to welcome Tamara from NPR. I'd also like to take a moment to thank New England Public Media for their support of tonight's program and to thank our premier media sponsor, Mass Live. And now to introduce tonight's speakers is Dara Kennedy from New England Public Media's new show, And Another Thing. Dara?
Thank you for that welcome. On behalf of NEPM, I just want to say how grateful we are to partner with the Springfield Public Forum. As co-host of And Another Thing, the new program on New England Public Media that invites engaging conversation behind the stories, I am delighted to introduce both our speaker and moderator for this evening. Tamara has been an NPR White House correspondent since 2014. She co-hosts the NPR Politics podcast, the #1 political news podcast in America, and is also a member of the Politics Monday team on PBS NewsHour, a weekly segment that rounds up the latest political news. Tonight's event will be moderated by Professor Ray LaRaja. Professor LaRaja is Associate Dean at the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences and is a professor in political science at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. That's where he is also Associate Dean of the UMass poll. His research focuses on political parties, elections, and political reform. Please help me in welcoming them both. Ray?
Thank you, Dara, and welcome everyone, and welcome Tamara. It is wonderful to be here and to have this conversation with you about the Biden administration's first 100 days. Let me remind the audience that you can submit questions through the Q&A function on Zoom. So let's jump right in. Tamara, I can't resist asking this first question. Given your experience as a White House correspondent over several administrations, so you've held this position with 3 presidents now. What's it like to be in the press room today compared to the Trump administration?
Well, I happen to have a prop, which is my wristband to get into the hottest club in town, which sadly, I'm not actually going to the hottest club in town anymore. I'm just going to the White House. But under the Biden administration, we have to get COVID tested every time we come into the White House. And there's actually a limit on the number of reporters who can come on campus. And I should say journalists. It includes photographers and crew people from television. And the limit is, I think it's about 100 people a day. So what is it like in the Biden administration? It's like kind of hard to even compare because there's this empty feeling that it's just, in the press area where we hang out, there's just no one there. It's so quiet. And normally it would be buzzing and just teeming with people and, everything that would give you nightmares for the last year because of the close proximity. It's a small space. In terms of covering this White House and I will say also in the Trump administration, they never put restrictions on how many people could come. We sort of self-policed and we did our best, but we could only self-police so much. And there was only testing for people in the pool. Now there's testing, everyone has to get tested to come on campus. So it's just very different, even in terms of their approach to COVID safety for the physical plant, for the workplace that is the White House. In terms of actually covering the administrations, it's also very different. The administration's approaches to the press could not be more different. I would say that the Biden approach to the press is not that different from the Obama approach to the press. They don't love us, but they see that we have a purpose. And they need us to get their message out, or they choose to, use the press to reach the broadest possible swath of the American public. The Trump administration called us enemies of the people. They openly and actively attempted to denigrate the institution of the press for purposes that served President Trump and his agenda, that continue, his desire to control the truth or to define the truth was critical to the way he governed and is critical to his post-presidency. And his whole approach to everything, and arguably his whole approach to his entire career. And the Biden administration, in part because they are reacting to that, Trump wanted a show in the briefing room. The Biden administration wants to make a show of having briefings every day and making them as boring and factual as possible. It's so different.
I can imagine. Yeah, I was wondering if it was a little boring, even if some of the professional things have changed. Well, let's talk about the Biden record so far, what we're here about. So the 100-day marker has become this kind of golden milestone since FDR's first term. And it's the first chance to compare what was promised and what's been delivered. So what do you think? Is Biden delivering so far on his promises? Has this been a strong start?
Well, he broke FDR's record by sheer number of executive actions. Now, I think you and I can both agree that numbers actually mean very little when it comes to executive actions, but still, he did a lot of executive actions right out of the gate, realizing that there is only so much that a president can do through Congress. He knows he was in Congress for a very long time. But, in terms of what he did when he came into office, getting Congress, or more accurately, Democrats in Congress, to use this procedural thing called reconciliation to pass on a party line vote a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. That is not insignificant, and it contains in it any number of Democratic policy priorities. I mean, much of it not permanent, much of it in like an experimentation phase. But that legislation, that was a very big accomplishment. I mean, if you think about President Obama, his relief package that passed was what, like 700 billion, not trillion. So Biden, right out of the gate, with Congress, understanding how Congress works, realizing the mistakes of the Obama administration, and just saying like, I'll negotiate with you later, but right now I'm going to label bipartisan as like, there's this mayor in Texas who likes my plan. He got that thing done. Now, certainly there have been issues that advocates wanted him to address more fulsomely that he didn't. He was like, here's my immigration proposal, and then would never have possibly mentioned again for the next 100 days if it had not been for the unaccompanied minor crisis at the border. When it comes to gun violence prevention, advocates wanted more action. They wanted him to, get out there and push for legislation. He's not using political capital on gun violence prevention. That said, he did, they aren't actually even executive orders, but there were administrative actions, is what I like to call them, related to gun violence prevention that, a year from now, 18 months from now, could bear fruit in terms of regulatory changes to the way guns are handled or gun accessories are handled. They could make a big difference. And the gun violence prevention advocates would say, yes, this might be quiet and this may not be everything we wanted, but if they actually succeed, then these regulatory changes could save a lot of lives. So, it's this interesting thing where he's just been sort of slow and steady. If one of his goals was to be a president that you don't have to think about when you wake up in the morning, then he is succeeding. But has he accomplished everything he set out to accomplish? No. But they have been extremely strategic. They have been sequencing out how he does things when they do it. He has been shockingly disciplined. for anyone who covered Joe Biden when he was not the leader of the free world, he is being shockingly disciplined.
To what do you attribute that?
I don't 100% know. I have a theory that I have not tested that being the leader of the free world can affect a guy. That when you're vice president, if you accidentally announce that, that the administration is going to change its view on gay marriage, well, heck, you're the vice president. If you say something's a big effing deal, you're the vice president. Like, you're not the president. Like he went off script. He was never on script. In fact, his script was to be off script as vice president. He was kissing grandmas, like the whole thing. And when you're president, though, everything you say is recorded. Everything you say, people are watching. Everything you say could affect or undermine your goals. And that can lead to a high level of discipline, I think, when it's all on you.
So it sounds like he's quickly grown into the job, or at least his experience made him prepared to fit that stage. You mentioned the American Rescue Plan, how the big deal dealing with COVID and the economic recovery. Now he has these other ambitions, the American Jobs Plan, which focuses on infrastructure, workforce. And then on top of that, he's got this American Families Plan, which is about education, child welfare, universal preschool. I mean, these are popular policies, by the way. We've
pulled them.
Yeah. But he has razor thin margins in Congress. So what are his chances of getting this passed? And is he going to get any Republican support? I mean, there used to be this thing called the honeymoon decades ago. But is something like this still possible today?
I don't know that there is really a honeymoon. I mean, I think that he has personal good relationships with Republican members of Congress. He is not going to go into the East Room and personally trash any member of Congress. He's just not going to do it. Is he going to get them to vote for these major Democratic priorities and, completely abandon all opposition? No. So I don't know exactly how this works out, but I think there is one scenario under which they do an infrastructure bill that, lots of people have yelled at me for trying to define infrastructure as like roads, bridges, water, and broadband. But instead of defining it as paid family leave and education and all of the things that undergird the economy, but that aren't like actual physical things. So I could see a scenario where there is a discrete package that is much smaller, that is a Christmas tree of all the goodies related to roads, bridges, things that you can name after senators, that could get some bipartisan support if it's narrow enough. And I don't know exactly how they would pay for it. But there certainly are things that they could agree on. It's possible. And then you have the big rest of the American Jobs Plan, America's Families Plan, all the other things that maybe they can get through reconciliation. And reconciliation being, for everyone who is a normal human being and doesn't follow all the words, reconciliation being this weird budget trick where they can pass it without having to get through a filibuster-proof majority. But I'm not really quite sure how this is going to play out, and I don't know how long it is going to take. What the president said today, which was the line I clipped for my little 45-second news spot, but was a line that really, I think, struck what they're getting at here. Is he's like, I'm not willing to do nothing. I'm not willing to have another infrastructure month in America where at the end we don't do anything about infrastructure, because it's become a punchline. They've been trying to do infrastructure for basically a generation, but certainly like once a year, President Trump was like, we're going to do infrastructure. And then he would, say something completely unrelated that would sink everything. So I think that there is widespread support and legitimate agreement that there are infrastructure issues, there is decay, there are competitiveness issues. But I'm not 100% clear on the path, because there are moderate Democrats who so far have hung in, but I don't know if they can, the closer you get to 2022, if it doesn't remain, it depends on how popular Biden remains. It depends on how truly popular these policies are. It kind of depends on whether Republicans figure out how to land a punch, because I would argue that thus far they have not been having policy arguments with Democrats. They haven't figured out how to brand these things in a way that sticks yet. They've had more luck with immigration. They've had more luck with Dr. Seuss or Mr. Potato Head or burgers.
It's kind of hard to fight against infrastructure. So, and it sounds like
Right.
Biden's ready to cut some deals, and you'd think some of these people would like some new bridges in their backyard.
I mean, every state has major infrastructure problems.
Right.
And senators really do truly love getting their names on bridges.
Right.
Like
So
the good ones, the good bridges.
Right, exactly. But has he actually been in touch with people like Mitch McConnell or other Republicans to try to work out deals? Or is he just following a script that says we tried this in Obama and we're just gonna, this is all kind of a window dressing, we're just gonna go for it?
So one thing that I think is really interesting is that the first big four meeting, so that is the Speaker of the House, the minority leader in the House, the majority leader in the Senate, the minority leader in the Senate. So Mitch McConnell's first White House meeting is next week as part of this big four. But Biden has been meeting with bipartisan groups of senators, even like sort of random ones where it was just like all the senators, a bipartisan group of senators on the Environment and Public Works Committee, or like the committees that would be in charge, but like not the heavy hitters, not the people who you would consider to be the usual suspect deal makers. I think next week, Shelley Moore Capito, who's one of the senators involved in the Republican alternative, is going to be bringing a group over to the White House. Today, Biden was in Louisiana and had an extended close talking, because it's Biden, tarmac conversation with both of the Republican senators from Louisiana. Like, I can't tell you, I mean, I'm sure it's happened, but President Trump, outside of like a disaster, I can't think of a time when a Democratic senator would have met him on the tarmac. And yet you have two Republican senators on the tarmac with Biden. I mean, they might have been saying, come to us, we're not coming to you. Our position is on solid ground and yours isn't. I don't know what they said. We couldn't hear over the jets. But the fact that, I mean, there are conversations happening. The other thing, President Trump called up members of Congress all the time. And it was like this weird thing, because it was like, oh God, the president called. And it was like, I was talking to the president. There were people who were like, oh, what was the president up to last night? Like, you would go to the Hill to talk to members of Congress so you could find out what the president was thinking. I get the impression Biden is having regular conversations with some of these people, but it's not this sort of oddity in the same way, because he has these longstanding relationships.
So relationships really matter. So it seems to be helping him. And
I don't know if relationships matter or not. Obama certainly proved that relationships could help if you had them, which he didn't.
Right.
But I don't know yet whether Biden is succeeding, but he has relationships. That much we know.
Okay. So that's still to be seen.
Yeah.
And, when you think about this, how that translates to voters, according to our latest UMass poll, majorities of Americans, there's very strong division still between the parties and how they appraise Joe Biden. And majorities of Americans actually believe relations between the two parties have worsened since he became president, and race relations, things like that. So what are we to make of this at this
Okay,
point?
so I went into your crosstabs because why not, right? And I want to talk to you about it. It seems to me that this is really just partisanship in play. This is polarization. This is, Biden derangement syndrome or something, which is maybe probably not Biden derangement syndrome, but just not Trump derangement syndrome. And what you have is you have people who voted for President Trump overwhelmingly saying partisanship is worse now that he's in office, race relations are worse now that he's in office. And you have Democrats or people who voted for Biden saying like, oh, it's the same, maybe it's a little better. And so it almost seems like every question becomes a litmus test about Trump.
Mhm.
And because Joe Biden is not Trump, he's made everything worse for people who voted for Trump. And it truly seems like it's just a pure litmus test, just like and I actually think it's interesting. I wonder what you think of this, why Democrats are sort of more like moderate in their appraisal. They're not going like 90% everything's better, Biden is president now.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, one of the other things we found in that poll is people think he's competent, as you're talking about.
Yeah.
He's compassionate, but very few people think he's inspiring.
Right.
So he's not going to get your juices flowing as president. So they're like, yeah, the Democrats, he's our guy. So that's kind of my guess on that one.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the Democrats. He's trying to keep things together within his own party. And, if you think about what happened in the nomination process, there was these factions, the progressives, and then people perceive Biden as being, much more moderate. We see AOC praising him and the moderates liking him. So do you think the gloves are going to start coming off as things go along? I mean, first of all, how is he doing this?
Yeah.
And then if he doesn't start using the bully pulpit more, the progressives going to get upset, or the moderate. So what's your sense of how things are going to play out?
So at this point, so far, the moderates are kind of like, he may not be shouting it from the rooftops, but this American Jobs Plan has a lot of elements of the Green New Deal in it. And so like, cool, he's not as bad as we were expecting. I mean, I think that there really is an element of progressives are getting a lot of what they wanted. I mean, he hasn't succeeded yet, but he is certainly acknowledging what they want, including it in his proposals, not making a big deal out of it, not calling it the Green New Deal. He's sort of this non-threatening older white guy who can make progressive proposals and have people think he's still a moderate. And certainly there will probably come a time when he loses some progressives or loses some moderates. But right now, the progressives certainly can get more with him than they can without him. They can get more if they can keep the moderates on board. They're going to get more with Democrats in power than they will with Democrats out of power, or Democrats divided, which is basically the same as Democrats out of power. And for now, these policies are polling well, so the moderates are not fleeing. If there comes if Biden's popularity goes underwater, if he becomes toxic, if he becomes not this non-threatening Uncle Joe character and somehow becomes this scary monster that Republicans can run against, then they'll peel off. Their political self-interest will say, protect yourself. But for now, there's no reason for them to run off.
Okay. So for now, the progressives are playing nice with Senator Manchin of West Virginia, trying to make sure that he stays. Although he seems to be one of the people who are possibly blocking some of the things they want. But what about a lot of those are bread and butter issues that a lot of Democrats agree on, even if there's some differences. There's some polarizing issues that really get the culture wars going, in a sense. Things that include guns, this talks about school shootings, race and civil rights, sex and gender orientation. How much is Biden downplaying these issues at this point, or is this something that he is talking about with his staff?
So I think that it's interesting. The Biden folks one of my colleagues said something on the air about Biden not doing much on race related issues or something like that. And they were like, how dare you guys say that? He's done more than any president in history on this stuff. And I think I think that the reality of Biden is that he is sort of low key doing a lot on these hot button issues, but doing it in a very low key way. Like, he did this gun violence prevention event, but what were his policy moves? He wasn't, he did call for an assault weapons ban, but like what he actually did was name an ATF director and call on the Justice Department to do regulations of so-called ghost guns. And these are things that gun violence prevention advocates that really care about and think would make a big difference. But this is not, registering people's guns and taking them away. He's going for things that potentially could make a big difference, but that are not the kind of thing that's going to make a headline for a week. He is actively avoiding the culture wars. He is not defending or criticizing Dr. Seuss or whatever the thing of the moment is. He's just staying out of it. Part of that's this discipline thing. He's just not engaging on the things that don't move him closer to getting the legislation that he needs, and also that he has this goal. His administration has made it very clear that he wants to lower the temperature in the country, give people less to fight about. I don't know if he's going to fix polarization this way. I don't know if anything can fix polarization as it is right now, but he's just being very low key about some things. And in part, that's political pragmatism.
That's what it sounds like. Although things like immigration, which are definitely hot button issues, are going to be thrust upon him. But
oh yeah,
but let's actually, that turns to something that it appears that Democrats are already concerned about. They should be concerned about. Almost every single president, if we think about the elections going forward in 2022, almost every single president in the last 100 years, they lose House seats, U.S. House seats in the midterm, sometimes in big ways. But Obama lost many seats. The current Congress, as we know, has these thin margins for the Democrats. What's the chatter in the White House about losing the next election? Are they expecting it? Is the administration taking this into account in pushing certain things? What have you heard on the ground then?
I don't think that any administration assumes that they're going to have their majority for any length of time, which is why, as we talked about at the beginning, the 100 days is, it's not just because it's an arbitrary milestone. It is because from the moment you become president, you begin turning into a pumpkin. Your shelf life starts declining. Your opportunity to get big things done wanes with every moment. And 2022 looms large in that. I don't know how this is ultimately going to pan out. Trump didn't lose as many seats as one might have expected. Biden didn't have particularly long coattails at all in 2020. I think who knows what happened, but it's almost like the voters were looking for divided government or something. I don't know what happened. These things, he just didn't have coattails. Yeah. And so there aren't like a huge number of people who rode in on the Biden wave who are going to be endangered. There are a huge number of people who rode in on an anti-Trump wave in 2018 who've now been reelected twice, who might be in trouble. And the other thing that I can't fully get my mind around yet is there will be redistricting between now and 2022. So a lot of endangered seats could be have completely different lines, and you just don't know where it's going to end up. I think one thing that, and again, it's not predictive, but so far there isn't a Tea Party, right? Like the the former president has not gone away and a grassroots movement has not upswelled. Instead, what you have from the opposition is a party currently fighting with itself, but I'm sure they'll figure that out and settle in. And it seems like they are settling in behind a charismatic former leader who lost and who is still lying about what happened that caused him to lose. And maybe that is a recipe for winning. Maybe all those people who supported him and believe that there was fraud are going to be so angry that they are going to be driven to vote. But he's not going to be on the ballot. And he hasn't had particularly good coattails when he's not on the ballot.
That's a good point. That is a good point. He's not on the ballot, although the Democrats do have challenges sometimes in midterms driving up some of their voters, of course.
They absolutely do. And another thing that could end up happening is with these more restrictive voting laws, either it could work and Democratic turnout could be affected, or it could work to juice Democratic turnout because, they'll be more organized and more upset. It's like, all of which is to say, it's early and don't hold me to anything.
It is early. In fact, I was going to actually ask you about plans for 24, but before I do, since there's such a short window, what's the talk about? I read recently about people whispering about Justice Breyer.
Yes.
So, because they want to make sure while I have this window. So
yeah.
Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, the Senate is one sick Democratic senator away from not having a Democratic majority. Like it is a perilous situation for Democrats who would like to maintain control of the Senate. We had an episode of our podcast about this, but there's a lot of energy on the left, certainly trying to urge Justice Breyer to retire at the end of this term so that a Democratic Senate can be assured to fill in, find his replacement so you don't end up with a Merrick Garland type situation or a Ruth Bader Ginsburg type situation. And there were a lot of people that were frustrated with Justice Ginsburg for not retiring when there was assurance that there would be a Democratic replacement, or not a Democratic, that a Democratic president could choose her replacement. I don't know what Justice Breyer is going to do. I don't know. There's no indication that the White House is pushing this. This is largely coming from activists on the left. But people make life decisions all the time, including Supreme Court justices.
Okay. Yeah. We'll see how that plays out. And I've also heard, well, let me actually, I'm going to get to the audience questions in a moment, but I want to ask you, what if, a pressing question you might have for Biden this early in his administration. If Biden were here right now, what would you most want to know from him?
Yeah, I mean,
he's going to tell you the truth. He's taking a truth serum.
Yeah, right. I would like to know if he is purposely under-promising and over-delivering on vaccines, or if he really thinks these are ambitious goals. Because these goals were big numbers, but I don't know ultimately how ambitious they truly were. And it seemed like it was very much about restoring people's faith in institutions and restoring people's, like, this can work. Let me show you how. Yeah. So I guess I would like to ask about that. What else would I like to ask him about? I mean, I really do want to know what he thinks bipartisanship really means.
Good question.
And I also would love to ask him why he's being more disciplined and what's really driving it.
What books are you reading? Okay. Well, that relates to this question. I mean, there's a question from the audience about the importance of Vice President Harris and White House Chief of Staff Ron Klein to his agenda, but you might also talk to his being disciplined or what? I mean, so yeah, what roles are they playing right now?
Yeah.
Administration.
So I traveled with Harris on Tuesday. It was my first trip with her. And you want to talk about disciplined. Harris is disciplined. And, everybody has a different style, certainly as vice president, but she's not going around kissing grandmas and saying random things. I can tell you that much. Not as much of a Mr. Toad's Wild Ride traveling with Kamala Harris. I think she's still trying to find her sea legs. I think that she is, I wouldn't say that she's afraid of her shadow. I think she's confident in who she is, but I think defining your role as a vice president is actually an incredibly challenging thing to do. I think that her relationship, the way President Biden is defining their relationship, based on everything that he said and all of the pronouncements and announcements, his approach to her vice presidency is very much defined by his experience as vice president. And the idea that she's going to be the last person in the room whenever he makes a decision. Not that he will take her advice, but that she will be the last person in the room. Because Biden was the last person in the room for Obama, but we know from numerous books and writings that he often did not take Biden's last piece of advice.
Right. That was his promise, his demand from Obama, that he would be the last person in the room. But you're right. Obama didn't promise him the final decision, obviously. Yeah.
Right.
Good point.
And so she is in the room a lot. They make a point of her being there at his events, at his major announcements. There is a concerted effort to include her and to have a good relationship publicly. In terms of what her actual role has been, he has given her the worst job in America, but not quite the very worst. But to deal with the foreign policy portion of the migrant issue. So the border is not her thing. It's everything south of the border that is her thing. So she will be going to Mexico and Guatemala in coming weeks. She will be dealing with those countries and those leaders, but she is not responsible if lots of children show up at the border without parents. And it's not a great assignment. It's definitely not an easy assignment. And it turns out it's an assignment that Biden also had. And the other thing she's currently in charge of is rural broadband. And that was such a non sequitur. I'm where did that come from?
Yeah. Good point.
Now, rural broadband, super important, yeah. Absolutely critical, obvious, made more obviously important by what we've all just been through. Can you imagine going through this without good internet? Lots of people did. And it's an incredible, important bipartisan concern. But it's also kind of a weird assignment. In terms of Ron Klain, he has worked with Biden for a very long time. There is a whole class of people who are involved in this administration in all areas of the White House, the State Department, all over the administration, who are political professionals who got their start when they were young in the Clinton administration. They worked in the Obama administration, and now they are coming back to the Biden administration, almost slumming it in a way. You've got Gina McCarthy, who was the EPA director, is now in charge of domestic climate policy. And I saw her twice today around the White House. Or John Kerry is in charge of climate policy on the foreign front. I'm working on a story about Gail Smith, who led USAID and is now the COVID envoy to the world. You just have a bunch of people who, Gene Sperling, who I love. Gene Sperling, who, Council of Economic Advisors. I don't remember what he did.
He goes back to Clinton administration, right?
Yeah, he goes back to Clinton. He left, wrote West Wing for a while, or consulted on West Wing, the show, and then was an economic advisor in the Obama administration. And now he's back. And and he's the implementation dude for the American Rescue Plan. Like they've got all of these people, and Ron Klain is another one of them, but like all of these people who go way back with Biden, go way back in Democratic policy circles, and they're just like here to make the government work. And I don't know how long they're going to stay, but they feel like this responsibility to prove, and Biden has talked about this, but to prove that democracy can work, that democracy is better than autocracy, that America, like the idea of America, that the US government can work for people. It is a very big idea that they are very driven by.
That's really interesting. And experience brings some competence there. And
yes.
It is amazing. They have a long roster. And I should point out, they also have more women appointees than any other administration thus far. So, yeah.
Their one weakness is in AAPI representation, but otherwise they've, and this is the other thing about them, like, and Ron Klain has been leading this up. They were very deliberate about announcing all of their appointments and nominations and making sure there weren't too many white guys on any roster that they announced, which meant announcing people up and down the chain just so that they could have diverse announcements with every single announcement.
Yeah. So here is a foreign policy question from the audience.
Wish me luck.
All right. Well, let's see. Okay. China and Russia both loom large in this global stage. So how is the Biden framing this when you're in the White House press room? What are they looking to just show their toughness? Are they serious about taking some action? I mean, based on what you can see from your meetings with folks in the White House.
Yeah, Biden talks a lot about competitiveness, about wanting to offset China, about wanting to compete with China. They don't talk about competitiveness with Russia, because that's not really what they're aiming for there. And I mean, it's hard to say like Russia is more of a malign influence in the world, but they are, actually, I can't say that. But they're approaching them differently. We don't know if it's going to happen, but there's a possibility that Biden could end up meeting with Putin in June. It's, both of these relationships in the Trump administration, there was obviously all the weirdness with Russia. And with China, there was this wooing and attempting to have a good relationship with China that then he completely blew up when coronavirus came along. But he didn't blow it up until after he got a deal that he wanted on trade that I can't even figure out what it actually did. But I think Biden is reaching out to other Asian nations and trying to build coalitions, and the whole idea of the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal was to offset China. Well, TPP is toxic, obviously, but Biden is trying to restore those relationships with Japan, North Korea, Australia, other countries in that region, India, the Quad countries, trying to sort of reassert America's presence. And with both of those countries, there's a very clear message from Biden that he does not appreciate their anti-democratic tendencies. And which is not a message that Trump ever delivered, because he liked their anti-democratic tendencies and wished he could do the same thing. So it's a very different approach, but in the end, it all comes down to diplomacy, and Biden is very focused on diplomacy over anything else, and sort of trying to maneuver globally to reassert America's presence without, but he still has a very, very much an America first approach. He's more America first than Obama was. It's sort of a populist idea, it's the ideas about you need to manufacture in America, we need to vaccinate Americans first. He does have this tendency to want to take care of home first.
Yeah.
Which, like lots of presidents,
Yeah.
anyway, it's not an uncommon thought.
Of course, yeah. But he's also trying to speak to, I'd be curious what your colleagues from the foreign press think about how he's doing this, but he's also trying to send messages to others overseas.
Well, like going back to where we started, right? There's a near daily press briefing at the White House, and they are literally just, in addition to whatever signal they're sending to America that they believe this institution matters, they are sending a signal to the world that an American administration can take questions and that the press is not the enemy. That is a global message.
Okay. Here's a question turning back to what many folks see as Biden's chief obstacle, and that is Mitch McConnell. He says he's 100% opposed to the administration's policies right now. He said that with Obama. Now he's not in power right now, but what's this? How does this affect the Biden agenda?
Well, and I think that when McConnell was asked that, it was, and I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it was sort of a, what are your thoughts about Trump and the insurrection, or like what is the soul of the Republican Party? And he's like, I'm 100% focused on opposing the Democratic president, which is a little tiny bit possibly different than I'm going to make this dude a one-term president. McConnell and Biden are personally on okay terms. McConnell is a very calculating political creature and is, looking for his angle and would love to be majority leader again. And McConnell is limited in the power that he has to stop the Biden agenda if they want to use reconciliation. He only has so much power. But he, as we say, is one untimely Democratic illness away from it. So
on that point, why is it, so they have reconciliation, which is this weird move, but some things can't pass through reconciliation.
Yeah.
Why isn't Biden pushing to end the filibuster? Would that make his life easier to get all these big programs passed without having to go through the circus jumps of reconciliation?
So my thought on that is, and what many smarter people have said, is if you remove the barrier of the filibuster, you will discover that Democrats don't actually agree with each other.
Interesting.
You will find that there are not 50 Democratic votes. One, there aren't 50 Democratic votes to get rid of the filibuster. But two, there are not 50 Democratic votes for a lot of things that the people who want to get rid of the filibuster would like passed. And so it would be hugely frustrating if they got rid of the filibuster, because then they would discover all the things that they still can't have. So I think that's a bit of a cover.
It's a bit of a cover. Yeah.
I think that's why there's not a race to get rid of it, because I don't think that in the end it would get them that much closer to what they want.
Okay.
Obviously, there are lots of people that want to get rid of the filibuster, and I'm sure we will hear from them that I am terribly wrong about all things related to the filibuster. But it's just with that slim a majority and 2 to 3 to 4 moderates who have elections coming up potentially, you're going to lose the moderates.
Yeah. That sounds like an interesting theory then. Here's another question from the audience member, and it has more to do with what's your day like? How many people do you talk to when you're chasing a story? And and then they want to know, how close are the TV and movie versions of The West Wing to press briefings in reality?
So my day is different every single day. Some days I talk to lots of people. Some days I talk to no people. Sometimes I'm texting people. Sometimes I'm up at 4 a.m. to be on Up First, and sometimes blissfully I am not. But it turns out lots of people listen to Up First, so it's good to be on, and I like it very much. And so, so there is no normal day. There is truly no normal day. You just never know what is going to happen. Today I was at the White House and couldn't find anybody I wanted to talk to. But I went around and found people who could tell me who I ultimately needed to talk to. And so then I, sent a lot of emails. It just really depends on the day. In terms of what it's really like, the press briefing room is much smaller and grungier in real life than it is on TV and in the movies. If you walk in and, on tours and normal times you could, some tours, if you walk in, you're like, oh my God, it's this tiny little thing. It's like a set, it's like Disneyland. It's not real. It looks so much bigger on TV, so much bigger. And it is everything's falling apart. I'm on the facilities committee for the White House Correspondents Association. And let me just tell you, we are overdue. We need new chairs. We need new carpet. We need new paint. We need weather stripping. It's a mess. But in probably my biggest achievement of the entire year, I got a new soda machine in the break room that also has the bathrooms and the press work area. And it was installed today, and there's Diet Coke. And I might just, have to retire.
You are people's hero. That small group.
Oh, but I will say Air Force One, for everything that is about the White House itself, Air Force One is truly as awesome as it seems. It is so cool.
So I would love to see Air Force one day maybe, but let me
ask you about, go to the Reagan Library and see the model Air Force One, the old Air Force One.
So one thing that the conservative press has always said is, oh, the White House press corps are going to be too easy on this administration. What's your sense of the tensions in the room? What are the Biden team, Jen Psaki, what does she complain? What does she push back against you guys the most? And what's most frustrating for you and the press corps right now? You're dealing with a lot of professionals here. What's changed in the room and how things get done?
Well, she has purposely turned down the temperature, much in the same way that President Biden has turned down the temperature. She has told us that, in an interview I did with her, that I didn't put this part on the air, but the president specifically told her, if you take this job, I want you to turn down the temperature in the room. We see these briefings as being part of restoring America. So she is not going to come into the room and fight with us. She may be frustrated with us. She may not like 12 questions about whether it's a crisis or not on the border. They hate questions, that all White Houses do, but they all hate questions about semantics, and they hate it when reporters ask the same question as someone else just so that they can get themselves on tape asking the same question. There's the common complaints. I think that there is this administration has worked very hard to provide us with information, to have briefings and background briefings, and to drown us in fact sheets. And those are all very helpful things. Having a professional operation is certainly helpful. They would hope that it would get them better coverage, or, that we should just put a halo over them and say, thank you, you are the best because you are being minimally competent. But, they certainly are open for criticism. They, in one area that I've covered a bit in terms of ethics, they have not been extremely transparent. They still have not released the White House visitor logs, for instance. They're not putting out logs of Zoom calls or calls that the president had, or, whereas in the past you'd see it in the visitor logs a few months later. We're never going to know some of these meetings that happened over Zoom. But, the combat is not happening as much in the briefing room as maybe in the past. And I think that people have been critical of this press corps. And I think part of it is that we're still finding our sea legs. And when when they have failures, we ask about it. When they get something wrong, we ask about it. We point it out. We're not going to pull punches. But these briefings in particular, sometimes it's just informational, like, when is he going to give a joint address to Congress? I think I asked that 3 times because I was just like, dude, why are you taking so long to do this? And that does not lead to spicy television, and it makes people think like, oh, you're not pressing them.
Or how about having Biden in the press room?
I would love to have Biden in the press room. I'd also love to have more than 13 people in the press room. And it's a small space. And so, as more and more people get vaccinated, I think that we will get closer to something resembling normal. I hope sooner rather than later. And that, you want to talk about an area where things are less than rosy. People are really frustrated at the lack of access. People want to be back. People are like, I'm vaccinated, let me in. And this White House is extremely cautious about COVID precautions. Part of that is that they want to model good behavior for the country. And part of that is that they seem to just be a little bit overly cautious about where we are in the pandemic. Like the president is still wearing a mask outside. Now, I know, like, I've been trying to figure it out too. It's a little logistically challenging. Do I take off my mask when I get out of the car, but then I have to put it back on when I go into Starbucks to get my coffee, but then I can take it off for that walk to the White House, but then I have to put it back on when I go through the guard shacks. Then I take it off when I walk from the guard shack to the White House, but then I have to put it back on when I get in. So I do understand that it's like, well, it's just easier to leave the damn thing on. But, the president is open for criticism, I think, for not just embracing his vaccinatedness. And, why are they still wiping down the lectern between speakers when we know surfaces aren't where this thing is lying?
So it sounds as though your experience has changed quite a bit from the Trump administration, including the soda machines and other things. But
the soda machine had nothing to do with the Biden people. Okay. Just for the record, it was not
it's
a political.
It's all your credit. I'll give it to you. Okay. So
you didn't even know.
You're giving high marks to the Biden administration. It sounds like for the first 100 days. We haven't gotten into his tweets and how they compare to Trump, of course. But is there anything else that you've learned in these first 100 days that we should know about? We only have a minute or so. Hardly a minute. Yeah. So.
What have I learned? That's a hard open-ended question. Shoot.
It is a hard open question, but is it something? Do you think the administration still is going to have its pedal to the metal the way they've been doing?
Yeah. I think that they are going to continue to push on this legislation, but I think we're entering a slower phase, right? Like the new goal is not another 200 million shots in arms. It's a much lower goal. Gone are the days of mass vaccination clinics, more or less. Now we're in sort of man-to-man combat and in individual persuasion. This is going to get harder. And the same is true with his legislative agenda. This is going to get harder. We are now entering a harder phase for him and for his administration. And I think the other thing that I am going to be continuing to follow, and I think that they need to continue to be pressed on, is the American Rescue Plan. That was $1.9 trillion. Where is the money? What is it doing? They've been sort of rolling out, announcing policies like, oh, today we're announcing food for kids over the summer, or, there are these various examples. But I want to keep tracking that. Mm-hmm. Is that money moving fast enough? Was that money needed? I think that there are a lot of elements of this recovery that are going to continue to be as uneven as the downturn was. Mm-hmm. And how are they going to deal with that?
Yeah, they have. So there's a lot of unanswered questions still, as it's not surprising. Well, we're going to have to close up here, but first I want to thank the Springfield Public Forum and New England Public Media for hosting this conversation. And thank you, Tamara Keith, so much for taking the time to talk. It was a really fun conversation. Thank you for taking time from your schedule and from your family life to be with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for great questions. I want to talk more with you.
Me too. Take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.